Good afternoon, everybody. Man, not only are we luminaries, we got to walk up this, bro.
About to feel good. I appreciate that.
We're, the attempt that we've been given is to talk about conversations that are tough, but I think what we've talked about before, I think the hardest part is starting conversation. Now, I know that, at least from friends in Baltimore, that we could walk into a room and they could be talking politics, the room could be on fire, anything we don't talk about, all we say is, hey, brother, what's up? What high school you go to? And that's it.
Yeah, right.
That's it. We just decide that everything else isn't happening for a number of reasons. So I guess the first thing we should talk about is being willing enough to speak to somebody. I think you and I've told you about the mother passing. I think we talked about hardships in life. We talked about your previous. Just being able to open up is the first step.
It is indeed. I think that we live in a society that traffics in fear. And that fear is consciously and subconsciously embedded in us, so much so to the point that we become agents against our own success, being more afraid of having a conversation in vulnerability than being brave enough to have it in reality, being able to look ourselves in the mirror and stomach what we see. And then not even just to stomach what we see, but to find a way to love what we see in spite of our many deficiencies. I think that as a culture and a society, our fear is much more apparent in our discourse because of the fact that we can't. Somebody said something recently that I really loved. They said, we don't need to live in a country that is so divided. We need to learn to be able to have hard conversations gracefully. And I think that there's so much in that, right? Being able to acknowledge that around the lines of the things that divide us, there also is still the human existence. And being able to have hard conversations graciously is to humanize somebody else's experience while at the same time validating your own without validating it, requiring the person submit something to you. I think that that's really important.
And part of the fear, I think, also is that I don't think people know how to fight. And when I say fight, let me get into a fist fight or start something negative. I think people walk away with that feel in the back of their neck, like, oh, I don't want to be the guy to start something. And you're not starting something. What you start is a dialogue that you're just afraid to have, that you probably had the car by yourself 100 times. Or that you have had this whole conversation of just emojis with your friends and never really said a word. But the difference it makes to be face-to-face with somebody to say, listen, man, I'll tell you right now, this morning I cried at the Tigers game. I thought about my mother, I thought about something stupid. I regretted. I thought that maybe the times I didn't answer the phone. I mean, everyone's got your mother called, like, I just can't wait. It's going to be the same conversation. And this morning I regret that I should have answered that one time out of 45 million that she called, and I decided to have that therapy session by myself.
But maybe if you were able to acknowledge the reality of why you don't pick up the phone when you have the opportunity, you don't become a person that regrets not having picked it up. You know what I mean? Once you would lose out. It should require us losing someone, losing a relationship, losing a game, losing an opportunity to understand that, I had to course correct it. Yep. And I think that more than anything is apparent in what we're talking about, our ability to be able to look at ourselves, who we really are, what we see, but also not stand in our own ways. Like how many relationships and opportunities do we get in the way of ourselves because of our pride, because of our lived experiences, because of the narrow vantage point in which we see the world.
And we also have to stop making it a one-way conversation. Listen, ChatGPT and Google will answer anything you want, but they're not going to respond to you. And they're not going to respond to you with emotion and heart. I think part of that is understanding that you may have a shared experience that I even haven't, and I've never taken a chance to tap into. I've decided, he probably hasn't gone through this before, so I'm not going to marinate today. But even if you haven't gone through it before, you've gone through something. And you've found a solution that has worked for you. That is an emotional thing discussion. But I think also like practical discussions that we may avoid in the nevertheless. Something may happen to your work, you feel, I felt slighted today. I don't think they knew that I live in this neighborhood, or don't do this in my everyday life. That should translate at work, but we're scared to be that person to say, you're hurting me. So you've had this, you've been indoctrinated with guys different, you guys come from different backgrounds for you. Was there a strategy to talk to the offensive lineman from Oklahoma so that he understood what it was like growing up in Baltimore?
Yeah, and that's a great question. Not a lot of people examine often enough to look at athletics. So that's one of the few places where it's supposed to be a meritocracy, right? So regardless of where you are, where you come from, what your background is, you are successful in the athletic arena through the fact that you are exceptional, not because of where you came from, what color you are, or anything like that. And your actual God-given ability, ability can manifest through training, passion, your actual interests. But when you have a football team, especially when you get out of the high school arena and now you're going to college with guys that came from all over the country, you know, of course, as a kid from Baltimore, went to Penn State University, you know, I'm going from the context of a kid that grew up in the inner city of Baltimore, that without the buffering my high school experience where I went to a school in Howard County, Mount Everett High School. That's my first time actually being in class with white boys. You know what I mean? Like, and then being the only black kid in a lot of these classes to be most white kids' introduction to black, and then to literally like wear my people on my shoulders with oh, so this is what black people call it, this is what I, you know, but that context prepared me somewhat for my college experience because for the first time, now I'm going to school with guys to the West Bay, Texas, you know, Oklahoma, places that I had no context for or appreciation for because I've never been. And vice versa, the same way, everything that they've heard about Baltimore has come from something that is the enforcement to them that isn't a representation of what my city truly is. So it's not until we can acknowledge those things that I can begin to appreciate your experience coming from Oklahoma or Texas, while still saying, hey, this thing was wrong, or this thing that you said is wrong. I refuse to allow anybody intentionally or non-intentionally to disrespect me or invalidate my existence, but that doesn't mean that I had to offend you in return. You know what I mean? Like, I have to find a way to articulate my experiences in a way that you can feel and understand, which is why I love the arts so much, because it allows me a space and a platform to speak on my experiences, and then it allows people to be able to not feel, but at least see something from a different perspective, which starts a conversation.
Well, one thing I know about you is that going through, I mean, I've gone to interview you, and before I can even ask the question, you've already been talking for 5 seconds. I think part of finding this comfort with each other is that we wait for it. We allow, you know, how will we get up today? And then not today becomes Tuesday, becomes Wednesday, becomes Thursday or Friday. So we've allowed it to fester without letting anyone know our actual feelings. Tell me about waiting for an opening or not letting someone spend time to think, oh, Aaron hadn't said anything. Should we be waiting for our opportunity, or should we, the moment that we feel that tingle in the back of our spine, should we be jumping in? Not to be mean to someone, to let them know this is where we stand, and this is what affects me.
I think that's where we need to spend more time interrogating as a community and as a society. It's because if it's something to me, it's something, right? If it's something to me, it's something. But the question that we're really asking ourselves, that we need to be asking ourselves, is why is it something, right? If we have a conversation that you triggered me, the fact that I'm triggered means that something is wrong. Now, the question I need to ask myself is, why am I triggered by this? Did this person genuinely mean to offend me? Did this person genuinely mean me harm? Or is there ignorance at play? Is there a lack of cultural competency to understand that you just said or did something? Or is this an intentional act that is meant to be harmful to my existence in some way? And that gauges how I respond. You know what I mean? Because speaking on something, saying that something hurts you is fine, but where do we go from here? And then what? That's always what I like to ask people. And then what? Like once you let somebody know that they've offended you, is the door closed now on collaboration? Is the door closed on friendship, on collaboration, on any of these things? Because if it is, then that speaks to a lack of maturity and a tough skin that is just too deeply embedded in my people's history for me to accept it for myself. You know, like if we had to go through so much just to get here, am I going to let hurt feelings stop me from making a connection or making a necessary act that needs to be made?
And her feelings aren't lasting feelings, they're feelings in the home. So if the lesson has been taught, then it won't be any more her feeling. If the lesson hasn't been taught, then you continue to teach. I think, like you said, some people get to the point where that her feeling will last for the rest of your contract, or the rest of the time of the office. I didn't like her the first day, I didn't like her the last day. But we never give you the opportunity to, you know what, she didn't get it today. We're going to talk a little about her good politics. Or I saw a show, they had the exact same thing happen. You should look at this. You should read this together. There should be a partnership, I'm assuming, between people when you mention collaboration. So if there's the head juror who definitely has out, you should still have that same feeling that I can talk to that juror and we'll hatch this out together. How come like people finding that partnership between someone who might be, I don't know, on the opposing side? Right now, the other discussion at work yesterday was new COVID-19 recommendations came out. CDC saying, listen, you don't have to quarantine anymore. If you don't have to be here, go ahead about your life. Man, you would have thought they says, go load up your gun and walk to the airport. I mean, people were, we lived all this time and we were quarantined, we didn't have. Tell me about how the two sides or something that expect us all can collaborate. It made her feel it's the first day to live together the second.
We move in as a society as though we all have a monopoly on truth. Everybody going around in today's culture says they're telling the truth. Everybody talk about standing on business. Talk about living your truth. I'm gonna tell you why that bothers. Your truth isn't necessarily mine, and my truth isn't necessarily yours. So for you to live completely in your truth, that means you refuse to see the world with my eyes. That means you refuse to empathize with, for those that take the second later on, to empathize with my experiences. It means that in some way, shape, or form, you're what's important and not what's like people. I think what I look for in people is much less truth, it's honesty. Because if I can count on you to be honest, I can count on you to be who you are. I can count on you to see the world through your lens and to move accordingly. But I can also count on you when you're shown in a better way, when you're shown that this experience isn't the only experience, when you're shown that this method of me communicating or moving or handling people is hurtful, is problematic. I got the wherewithal to course correct. You know what I mean? So I want to be able to be honest with people, and I want people to be able to be honest with me. But I'm not ignorant enough to believe it just because I'm passionate about something that I have the ability to be right. I mean, to be wrong.
Right.
And sometimes to be wrong loud. But if I'm wrong, if I need to apologize, the apology should be just as loud as the offense was. Just if I transgressed against somebody, then the way that I look to make amends needs to have some semblance of parity with the offense, you know. And I think that we need to operate more like that from a perspective as a society when it comes to conversation, because like anything else, there's an art to it. And too many people are spending way too much time sucking up all the air and oxygen in the room just trying to be right. You know what I mean? Like I could do less with being right if I'm not necessarily the most informed person on the subject. I want to hear evidence. I want everybody to give me your experiences, and then from that, I can tell you how I feel. But how I feel shouldn't be the pendulum that determines how we live. You know what I mean? I want you to be able to take that into consideration and to operate with a certain amount of art in that space.
And you're not being selfish. I don't think the speaker has to feel like they're being selfish because they're loud. I think that there's something from that conversation, there's something to be learned. A lot of us get timid because we're afraid of it. I'm not going to say that because I'm probably been right. We never give ourselves enough credit that even if we are wrong, there is education behind that loud look.
we're afraid to be wrong in public.
Yes.
But that's the problem. When you're in a society that runs from the hard conversations, you stick with what's easy. And usually what ends up being easy is to incubate yourself in a bubble of people that think just like you, that talk just like you, that come from exactly where you come from, that have the exact same experiences. And where does that bring us as a society? Further apart from it. You know, like, I advocate rather than environment because that's my artistic side going, but if I were to put one of my paintings up on the wall right now, and I would ask 3 different people in the room their experience, their opinion of what they think the inspiration was, we'll quickly find is there's a million miles between your world and mine, sister. There's a million miles between your world and mine, sister. There's a million miles between your world and mine, brother. But the space between us, that gray matter that stands in between your world and my world, that's where the good stuff is. That's the space that allows us to grow. That's the space that allows us to create. That's the space that allows us to inspire, to change. And we spend so long picking our diamond, picking our truth that we're going to stay stuck in, that we never spend time getting outside of that experience, having a conversation with somebody that doesn't share all of what's saying. Characteristics, and we stymie our own growth in that process. We kill the ability to imagine that things can be different, that we can be different, better, you know. And I think that that's something that we can kill within ourselves, because when we do that, we create and further widen the chasm that already exists in society that divides us.
There are volunteers, there are young people in here who will work together for a long period of time. And I'm guessing that their first interaction is an awkward one, trying to figure out where everyone stands. If you were the person giving them advice, forging this relationship for the first time, what are some things you can keep in mind as you walk into someone else's house and say, hey, I'm here to be a party, I'm here to volunteer, I'm here to help. What are some things that you should keep in mind, or things that you should strive to do with the young person that you're working with?
For one, be consistent. I think that in our city, our young people specifically become accustomed to the merry-go-round, benevolent, solicitors of hope and so many other things. You know, they've had teachers walk out. You know, in some situations, you've had parents or the mentors walk out. In some situations, you've had people that are taken, you know, by the system, by the breach itself, by circumstances that are beyond our control. And so many people come into this work with the idea that they're parachuting into a jungle, they're saving people. But it's like, yo, if you have that mindset, you need to turn and run as far away from my community as possible, because you don't belong. You know, it's an even exchange. If you're not learning, then you're not teaching. You know, if you're not experiencing things with them, then you're not serving them. If you're not enriching their existence on a day-to-day basis, then what are you there for? To feel good about yourself, to get a pat on the back, cookie? You know what I mean? You don't need any more of that. We don't need benevolent dictators. We need co-conspirators. People that come into our communities and not just tell us what we need to do to be a part of our community rescue, but actually help us build the shit. Actually help us construct that for ourselves in a way that allows me to know that I'm empowered. You know what I mean? I'm not looking for a handout or a piece of charity. I'm looking for somebody to give me the blueprint. You know what I mean? I'm not looking for somebody to dig a hole for me. I want them to be in the hole with me, you know, shovel. And I think that when we get that mindset, collaboration becomes much more fruitful and beautiful.
You mentioned 2 of your career, we talked football, we'll talk art. Hope you don't mind me asking about your third, good teacher. And the only reason I ask because, and you go where you need to go. I feel like you put in good work. I know Matthew Higgins as well, and I saw your face a lot. You wanted a lot to be done there, and I felt like you didn't feel supported. What can an employee do? What can someone who's collaborating with a bigger entity do to have your voice heard, even voice you know you're up against much more than one person?
And so, same answer I just gave, be consistent. You know, I wish I had a great answer for you that was sexy and trendy and had all the rainbows and emotions coming out of it. It's not that. And for everybody that's young in this room that feels like going to change the world, I fully believe that you have that capability, but it ain't going to look the way you think it's going to look. You know, if it was that easy, you know, the steps to get from point A to point B were that tangible and that solid, then our elders and ancestors would have accomplished that way before us. You know, not only are we dealing with institutions and systems that are generations old, but we're dealing with mentalities that are products of those systems.
Right.
You know, in order to change that, you need three things. You need a collaboration of sorts between three different types of people. You know, you need your creators that are innovative enough and talented enough to imagine a reality that doesn't yet exist. You need your strategists that are intelligent enough and problem-solving enough to create the structure and the process by which it's accomplished. And then you need your front lines people in the trenches that are brave enough and courageous enough to go out there into the world and actually make it happen. But none of those things are able to be accomplished in one prong in that thinks that it's more important than the other. And I think that we, in this line of work, we romanticize to our detriment. You got to understand that in a lot of cases, you're going to take way more L's than you get W's. You got to understand that you're going to spend most nights fretting over what's to come than inspired and thankful for what's already been accomplished. But one piece of a nugget that I would give in that, it's you got to celebrate every single night, no matter how small, no matter how big. The consistency of getting up every single day, going out to the world and doing right when everything and everybody around you seems to be conspiring to convince you that it's more lucrative to do it the other way. You know, in a society that's trying to convince every single one of us that we're the most important person in the world and we don't need anybody to succeed. A greater lie has never been told. We need each other. We can't afford to throw each other away. We can't afford to buy into the apathy that's continued to choke the life out of our communities. We have to change our diet if we're going to be successful in a way that hasn't come before us. And that diet is all encompassing. It's what we listen to, what we hear, what we eat, how we communicate with each other. There's a causality between all of that, and we got to ask ourselves constantly, am I being a part of the solution or a part of the problem? Do I have a blind spot where I'm just missing something? Am I the loud and wrong one in the room? And if so, how do I course correct?
But it's that instant communication. It's like you would never go back. If someone asks you it's a good restaurant, you would list 5 good restaurants that you would never list a bad. But if you get a bad email versus the 200 great ones, the only email that you remember for that 2 weeks is that one guy just got it. Aaron Maybin is a no good so-and-so. And that's all that you I don't know if it's ever you remember, because you're a different frame of mind than I. I know that I'll remember that bad one for weeks before I gave greetings to the 150 other good ones. So it seems like it's just important for us to change the frame of mind, not just how we think about other people, but first how we think of ourselves, so that we can.
That's what's reflected. If you come into the room and the first thing I have to say is, man, what? Well, you fly today. But if I come in and I'm messing on your shoes and I'm talking about your outfit, I'm talking about, your glasses, your haircut, and that says so much more about me than it says about you, because it says unequivocally what I value. If that's all I value, then yeah, that might look like garbage to me. But to somebody else whose value system is completely different, you the flies things to the sliced bread. And to understand that when we hate ourselves, if we've learned and been force-fed self-hate our entire lives, it becomes a lot easier to buy into the idea of how liberty is. If we haven't yet been able to determine how to properly love ourselves, it makes sense that we don't understand how somebody else could love us.
Not.
And that also makes sense how we could be such experts at self-sabotage. You know what I mean? Us as humans. If I were to ask everybody in this room, did you ever have a relationship that you completely messed over, where you were completely in the wrong? Anybody that didn't put their hand up would be lying.
To go to Andrew Plus.
But if I let you tell it in conversation, you're always going to be the hero of any story. Like we are. But my thing is, we can laugh and joke about that when we're telling jokes. Then when it becomes time to get real, we should be able to knock ourselves off of that high list. You know what I mean? That way, that it's become so easy for us for ourselves.
I think also the key is avoiding avoidance. We're maybe joke earlier about becoming a room. We just talked about icebreakers. Went to. I don't think we should avoid the elephant in the room. You know, if this where the conversation is, you don't have to have some provocative comment and some energy into words. But it's good to know where another person stands. Not so I can dog on you, or not so we can celebrate together, but just so that I can understand. You know what? Other people think differently than me. That was one thing that I remember in college. We were somewhere. A guy said to me, we were talking about where we were from, and so I said Baltimore, the person said, oh, Texas, and one day I said, I'm proud to be from the South. And I was like, oh. I was like, all right, here we go. So the teacher said, okay, I don't remember his name. It's like, Ryan. I said, Ryan, where are you from? And he says, I'm from the old line state of Maryland. I was like, what? I was like, I'm from there. And at that point, I could have walked away and just, at first, I'll admit, at first I was like, I saw Johnny Red Flag, everything wrong. But throughout the semester, we lived in the same daggone state that had a totally different perspective of where people.
Yes.
And I think that first contact changes everything. And so if you lower the curtain a little bit and just talk a little bit, understand, like that changes the entire aspect. You may not like him the rest of his life, but at least you're having the conversation, understand we can be on the same level.
That's why I said earlier that we need to learn how to have hard conversations with grace and compassion, because when we run away from the hard conversations, think about the ripple effects of that. The same way that we can't have a conversation about politics, right? Or so many education, so many different finance, there's so many different levels. If I say one of any 150 to 200 buzzwords right now, everybody in this room in some way, shape, will pick a hill to die, right? But where does that get us? That gets us to a place where politically we can't get any of our representatives in a room to agree on the same issue, where we can't have any of our institutions of higher learning get in agreement on as to how we can properly educate our kids, where our community organizations all beat for funding, for scraps from the same table from the city or from the federal government, when they realize that none of these scraps and floor is enough to sustain any of us individually. But rather than getting together and demanding that we add not just scraps from a table, but a damn seat at the table for ourselves, you know what I mean? Rather than actually coming together and saying, all right, this is my lived experience, this is your lived experience. But in order for us to cohabitate together, I gotta give, you gotta give. We're gonna meet each other in the middle. That reality goes out the window when we become so comfortable incubating ourselves in our silos. We gotta get to that gray matter. We gotta be able to spend more time with people on the other side of the aisle, even if we don't. Yeah. Even if I completely, if we just become comfortable throwing each other away, where does that get us? Well, again, and then what? That's always my question, you know, and I think that when we're asking ourselves that question, it requires that we be more intentional with how we communicate, with how we coalesce around certain issues, because we understand that us being out with one another is the reason why we continue to stay in the circumstance that we're in.
And there's something that I think volunteers do here that I think is important, especially for younger generations right now, because I know with my 16 and 14-year-old, their conversation is all pretty much digital. If I said to my little son, call your buddy, he will text the kid 14 times before he called his house just to have a conversation with him. It is a one-way. I look at the screen, I wait for a response, and I roll out. Our fear is that. And it's an honest fear. I fear that my kids are going to a job interview and sort of like freeze because they haven't had the back and forth. I think one of the important things about it here is that you have these conversations. Like you don't hop in the car, you go to the destination of your choice, and that car ride is silent. Whether it's controversial, or maybe it's just how is school. And they don't ask that because they'll just say, but what is your favorite part in school? Or what makes you tick? Why did you like this teacher? Make them explain themselves because there are times, my 14-year-old is eyes to the floor, he extends this weak handshake that's almost shake my guy's foot. I think that if I did that with my father, I would be stuck in the car for the rest of the day. And so I think one thing about this doesn't even have to be a courageous conversation, but a conversation period for young people just to get into the practice. We practice everything else. We practice Fortnite all day long. We practice what the best emoji is to say I hate them. Why not practice the idea of the give and take from this?
Now, I want everybody to hear me say what I'm about to say to you, my brother. I promise is in love.
Hey, let's do it.
But if my son doesn't have the ability to put the phone in his pocket and have a real conversation, that's not a reflection on society.
Well,
That's a reflection on me as his father.
you got a shot.
If I haven't shown him what not just an intelligent conversation, but a critical thinking conversation looks like, if I haven't shown him how to properly advocate for himself, if I haven't been vulnerable enough, now thankfully, my son is sitting right in the front row.
Thanks, sir. Good.
So I don't have to say anything. So if he's lying, if I'm lying, he can raise his hand and say, Dad, you're lying. But my son has saw me not just crying, but weeping before. My son has seen me physically and emotionally in turmoil. But he's also felt what love is supposed to feel like coming from a black man. He also has an understanding of the fact that vulnerability doesn't make me any less of a man. He understands that me being a provider is a hat that I wear in the same way that being an artist or being an activist or any of the rest of these things are. But the human being that houses this soul, the body that I have hit, is also just as capable of love, compassion, empathy, soothing, you know what I mean? Like all of these things. And if you're not exposed to that, not just in your household, but in your environment, if you don't have people around you that show you the many complexities of what it means to be human, then we can't get mad at our kids for not being fully developed. And it was our responsibility to put the tools in the toolbox in the first place. You know what I mean? Like, for example, we're having this conversation right now about, as a society, about toxic masculinity. I mean, the way the conversation itself is framed. Because real masculinity, so to speak, is not toxic, it's beautiful. You're seeing a bastardization of that we call manhood now, and that's what we would have a problem. But we need to reframe the conversation. So rather than putting out there 100 examples of what bad man looks like, who are the men that we want our young boys to emulate? You know what I mean? What are the healthy relationships that we want them to be able to see and be exposed to so that they can start to have them in their lives? So rather than talking about the people that are doing the job the wrong way, how about as a society we start to transform ourselves by pointing at these examples, the many examples that are out there, so mind you, of people that are doing it the right way. And we change the standard of what these things are. You know what I mean? Because if I'm a young boy and I'm, trying to grow into a man, I understand that when I look around in society, who does society celebrate? We celebrate practitioners of violence and every other negative element of our culture that we can name. And I say this as a former athlete that for years of my life was celebrated for my capacity to do violence, albeit in the athletic arena, but still blood sport, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like, that's what you get celebrated for. Whenever you're a boy, you show you show rage, you show all of these characteristics. People might see you in a negative light, but they see you. Truly love. And there's no more empty a feeling than the feeling of invisibility. And so many of our youth are running around trying to be seen so bad that they don't care what the energy is they get back. But as long as you've seen it, so we start seeing them and validating them for being the examples of the society that we wish to create, then we cook it with grease. But everything else is just, it makes for a good conversation, but when you get to praxis, it'll leave you wanting.
I guess audience questions for you. Here's the first one. How do you find a way to start a conversation where views and truths are different? And I think once you're in the subject matter, I think that we spend a lot of time holding back. We've been talking about this all day. I think you just forget about holding back. I think that, if you don't say it, someone else is going to. And I think if no one understands your perspective, where you're from, how it may affect your family, I don't know if there's an easy, here's what you say if you want to jump into the conversation. If it's on your heart, it's on your heart. No.
I had to figure out a way to say this without cursing. Just don't be a jerk. And that's the thing, man. When we have a one-on-one conversation, even if we're talking about your significant other, right? I love when you use that as an example. So your wife, your girlfriend, your better half, whatever. We all have arguments. You know what I mean? We all have disagreements. When you have the disagreement, who's being petty?
They did this, then they.
You know what I mean? When I know that you've transgressed a little bit, you've stepped about an inch over my line, my metaphorical line in the sand. Why does mine have to be a foot over yours? Where does that get us? And then what? You know what I mean? Like, in any conversation that we have, regardless of how right or wrong I think I am, I have to understand that it's as passionate as I am about my stance, the other person is just as passionate about their stance. And if I can't find a way to reasonably and rationally articulate my perspective in a way that they can understand, maybe I don't know what I think I know as good as I think I know. But when I have no other retort, when I have no other option, what do? We throw insults. You know what I mean? We invalidate respect, because that's all I'm left with. But if I can reasonably and rationally explain to you why I feel the way I feel, we can either agree to disagree, or we can have a deeper conversation about how we get closer to one another.
Is level. How do you find a version of a truth that resonates with others, but then does not portray how you feel or what you personally know on a given subject?
I'm a bad person to answer that. It sounds like, how do you find a version of the truth that'll make others comfortable? I don't believe in that. The truth is supposed to make you uncomfortable about it. You know what I mean? And hard truths have to be able to be delivered just as well as the soft ones. I think that, again, the tone, the energy, I'll say it like this. Now we're having a conversation at a metaphysical level. You bring peace forward into the room with you. So I think that in any conversation, if we're having the conversation from the perspective of a love ethos, read your bell, those can be happy. I think that from a love ethos standpoint, we have to find a way to communicate in a way that other people can hear. But there are certain folks that don't want to hear what you got to say. There are other people that, no matter how many citations or sources you cite them, it will never be enough. And it's good to know that you're wasting your breath, because that's something that if I bring honesty and truth to your front door and sit it there and you choose not to receive it, that's not on me. But I'm not going to silence myself because I don't think that you'll receive it either. I'm going to say what needs to be said, but I'm going to say it. I'm going to say it in love, but that doesn't mean that I have to. One of the chapters in my book is about we got to toughen up as a society, because it's not my job to have kids love us and calm down. But it's my job to have them from love, leading those from love-based respect.
How about a conversation about reparations for 400 years of evil and social segregation to start? This was on CBS this morning. I think they were talking. First of all, I think there's a misperception of what people think reparation would deliver them. from what, at least the way it's presented right now, is that money will be allocated in a lot of neighborhoods for whom had nothing. And whom for years, every time the opportunity came, they were the ones who were the bottom of the barrel. And I think that number one thing that's happened is understanding of what it means. So when a Hilton Rec Center comes up and there's the opportunity for them to gain something, that they can be at the top of the list or will be at the top.
All I'm gonna say is the conversation has been having since slaves have been advancing me. For me, it is for white folks to be as willing to get at that table with us as we are to get at the table with them. And I think that when you look at power in this country, nothing is ever just a net that's been given, especially when it comes to black people in America. So if we're ever going to see reparation become a real thing, all of America is going to have to be on board with the same way we are. Then we can have a conversation about details. But I think most of the time, in my experience, when we've had conversations about reparations, people just want it to be something that sounds and feels good to them. But what I ask them oftentimes is, why is it? Because I can name about 20 different things that have transpired the last couple of years that we've thrown billions of dollars at it. And I'm dead at the aisle that you're not seeing any protests, not seeing any people trying to. But I promise you, tomorrow, we had whatever version of reparations you think that we could settle on. If that was going to be a thing, the type of mobilizing against it that you would see from the folks that ever wanted to see black folks get in the first place would be unprecedented. You know, remember what happened in Barack Obama War 10. So yeah, I think that's there's a different commission every 4 or 5 years that does more investigating about what the right version of reparations would be, what it could look like, what it should look like. I think at the end of the day, it all sounds good, but until Americans really ready to see it happening, I believe it's just talk.
Good. So we got time for one or two more. In the black community, family comes first, even if they have certain bodies on the balance, setting boundaries with important people into your life without feeling regrets about it.
I don't think I have anybody in my life that I love, in my inner circle that has never hurt me in any way, shape, or form. And again, I'm not somebody that believes it's the world's job to handle us with care. That's I think that human beings are imperfect, and the fact that a person has the capacity to do harm doesn't erase the fact that they have the capacity to do amazing things as well. I think that as human beings, we have to get a lot better at boundaries. You know what I mean? Knowing that not everybody who I love can come in my house. Me too, but yeah. My son, I love a whole lot of people. My son never see walk through our door. I love a whole lot of people from a distance. I love a whole lot of people that I want loan money. I love a whole lot of people that I won't count on to do something if they tell me that they can do something. So what I'm saying is understanding that every human being is different, and they only have the capacity to do most times to be allowed them to do. So I think that we need to find ways of having boundaries that aren't so pejorative. Like for example, me having boundaries doesn't mean that if somebody transgresses against me that the relationship is over with. Again, I don't believe that I'm an abolitionist. I don't believe in the prison system. I don't believe in this idea of throwing people away. I don't believe that the way that we do things as a society is the way that we are going to transform the world. But just because I believe that doesn't mean anything for anybody in this crowd right here. That's my belief system. But because I have that belief system, it requires me to handle everybody in my care differently. But I have an understanding that I'm the steward of that. I'm the responsible one for that. So I can't put people in positions to hurt me if I think that they can be unkind with my life, with my, with my safety, with my family, any of the rest of those things. I'm not going to put them in a position to do so. But again, there are so many people I've been through hell and heaven with that in retrospect, with them no longer being alive, with them no longer being around, with them no longer being in relationship, that I regret being in a space where I threw that away. And I think that if you've ever lost a parent, if you've ever lost a loved one, if you've ever lost somebody that you used to argue with, you used to fight with, you used to see the world differently now, but you wake up in the middle of the night every now and again in tears because even if there was a fight, it was love they had this one more time. No, I think that if we're able to remind ourselves that those relationships do matter, but we need to be more intentional about how we have them, then it'll free us to be able to love a little bit easier, be able to live a little bit freer, to be able to exist in a way that we deserve to exist.
For some people, it's their first air of able to experience self-awareness. And they want to read more, so I'm going to go ahead and plug everything. The books out there, so the Hill Print Center, just stuff you've been up to since teaching and football and art and whatever else you do.
Yeah, man. So in the aftermath of my NFL career, I chose to come back to Baltimore to not just do my artwork and community work full time, but I also jumped headfirst into the education system. As James said, I had some time teaching in the Sandtown community at Van Anson Elementary School, where I was able to create the art activism workbook and curriculum that is now part of the educational process at least 40 schools in the Baltimore area, about 65, 70 schools nationally. And in the span of my time as an educator, made a lot of enemies for speaking truth and being honest, but also organizing and building towards something better, towards an education system that is more equitable and understanding towards my youth. In the span of doing that, I was moved from my position at Van Henson, but understanding that I can never expect the system that I feel like needs to be completely transformed just to accept those changes from the inside when it's their house. So we decided we needed one of our own. So in 2020, we opened the Hilton Rec Center in West Baltimore.
What I'm talking about.
Was closed for about 15 years, but myself and my partner, Torrey Smith, another former NFL player, played here at Baltimore for the Ravens for many years. We opened up that rec center along with his wife in 2020, ambitiously with a big vision of doing some good work, but understanding that it was a huge hill to climb. There's a lot of work that needed to be done. Long story less long, we started off with our own resources, with everything we could bring to bear. We struggled for, about a year or two, just trying to get everything off the ground, opening in the middle of a pandemic, all the rest of the things that she had inferred, starting something that ambitious on your own. But we stayed consistent. We served. We put the community first, created resources that gave of our time, energy, our resources, our families. And thankfully, this past year, we were greenlit to do a $25 million expansion of that project. We have Baltimore Ravens on board, we have other on board, we have a lot of other benefactors that have stepped up for the first time in my entire career. Anything that anybody knows, my work at the until about 2 years ago, nothing you've ever seen me do came with the help of benefactors. You know what I mean? It was just whatever resources you have there, whatever network you can utilize to fundraise, to get resources, all of those things. It was an uphill battle. Still an uphill battle. There are a lot of things that, come out of the workworks, even when you have a lesson like this, an expansion like this. But we're going from a position where on a day-to-day basis, we were serving about 100 kids a day on our campus. To by the time we get done, we're going to be looking at the 400 or 500 range for what we can do daily in the city, to be able to then start as an idea and grow into this in this short span of time. I want everybody to be able to use it as an example that we got to get past the point of talking about creating art and getting into the process of actually building it. We've been saying for years that our school system is failing, but what have we done to create something better? We've been saying for years that we need more creative facilities, that we need more recreational resources, that we need more economic opportunity. But how long are we going to wait with somebody to parachute into our communities and build that for us? We got to start to do that ourselves, and it's not bad, it's not sexy, it's not trendy, but it's working. And the world that we're looking to build, you know what I mean? And this process is working. And if it's working, then it's also worth the long nights, the late nights, the early mornings, the stress, all of these gray hairs one year about 4 or 5 years ago. I don't want to say that. But it's a blessing, you know. So we opened the Hilton Rec Center. It's in the middle of a construction process right now, but we reopened. When we reopen, be able to serve so many more and be able to expand on the work that we've already got done. And in addition to all of that, you know, I'm also an artist, so you know, I wrote some stuff that Kim Spree. We'll have a few of those titles with me, so I'll be hanging around for a little bit after our session, and like I said, just to pull up conversation.
We appreciate you there. Thank you for here.
Yes, these two beautiful gentlemen.